Good morning to you, Zahid. Good morning to the listeners. Happy New Year.
All right, so let's start off by finding out how important this day is for the ruling African National Congress.
Thank you. This day is quite important for a number of reasons. The first reason will be that the ANC will be celebrating 109 years of its existence, and the ANC remains the oldest liberation movement in the continent. Also, at the same time, this date is important because the ANC leadership that has been elected in Nasrec is actually moving towards its midterm, and this day is quite important for the ANC to be able to reflect on what has been going on since 2017 up to today. And then it means on those bases, the ANC must then be able to reflect and touch on the resolutions that were taken at Nasrec and actually provide a feedback to the electorate and to the members of the ANC at different levels. But another important aspect about this date is that the ANC should be seen to be coping with the current challenges that we are facing in relation to COVID-19. And that is why the ANC could not do the celebration as they normally do, because indeed the groupings or larger groups of people are prohibited. And then as a leading party and as the party that is seen to be fighting against the spread of the virus, then the ANC should actually still celebrate, but do it quite differently.
Yeah, so I guess it is a day of reflection for the ruling party. It is the oldest liberation movement in the country as well. Lots has happened during the existence of the African National Congress. So there's quite a bit to reflect on for the party at this stage. And tonight, the president is expected to address the members of the party. What are you expecting to hear from President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is also the president of the party, when he addresses the members of the party later on today?
A lot is expected from President Ramaphosa, but amongst others, there are main issues that one would always expect the president today. Firstly, the president of the ANC is not only being listened by members of the ANC, members of the opposition and ordinary citizens who voted for the ANC would love to hear what the ruling party says. But in the main, I would expect the president to touch more on issues that relate to the resolutions of the ANC that were taken at Nasrec and the extent in which the ruling party is moving in terms of implementing those decisions. Number two.
And just before we move on, I want to get your opinion on that. Where do you think the party is headed since the Nasrec conference in 2017? As you mentioned, it is a time for reflection for the party. So where do you think the party is headed since that period?
Well, I think there are still a number of challenges that remain. Firstly, the inability of the ANC to implement its resolutions. It's one of the biggest challenges. A number of resolutions have been taken at Nasrec, and indeed, the party has been found wanting in terms of implementation. Number two, you also have to look at the question of the responsibility that was given to this leadership. And that responsibility talks about the unity in the party and the fight against factionalism. And from where I sit, we still see those factional lines or groupings within the ANC. And one would expect to hear the president talking more about ways and means to deal with factionalism within the ANC. Because as we speak today, the ANC is defined along factional lines. each leader of the ANC that you see or you think of, you'd actually associate that person with a particular section. And that is an area that, for me, the ANC has not actually done well. But it does not only end there.
Mm-hmm.
The fight against sectionalism does not only end in the talk. It is about the commitment that should actually take place amongst those that are in leadership positions.
Mm-hmm. So I'm sure there's probably quite a bit of expectation from for the address this evening. And one of the issues you mentioned that the party has been struggling with is implementation of its resolutions. So perhaps would it be correct to assume that perhaps tonight's address might just be more talk until there is actual implementation of resolutions?
What South Africans expect from the ANC is implementation. All the plans are available for the ANC, but what people on the ground want to see is implementation. Remember, Zaid, a few years ago, the ANC was reminded of its resolution on free higher education by students on the ground. And that is the resolution that was taken in Polokwane many, many years ago. So the ANC need to learn about implementation and not only taking resolutions, because taking resolutions has got its own way of coming back to the ANC to haunt it as a party. But another aspect that you need to look at as well is that when the ANC takes resolutions, does the ANC deploy right people that can be able to implement those decisions? And I think that is one biggest challenge that the ANC actually faces. That after taking a decision, you still need to have right people that must be able to ensure that those decisions are taken through and they're actually being implemented. And that remains the challenge for the ANC today.
Mm-hmm. And I would feel that to actually get to these resolutions, to pass these resolutions, would be quite a challenge for such a large party with various people of different backgrounds, and to pass these resolutions for so many people coming together to pass these resolutions. It should be a challenge for the party. But in a statement yesterday, the party reiterated that they are committed to strengthening unity and deepening the renewal of the movement. This to me echoes the party's idea last year. So just how far do you think the party has come in terms of achieving this unity and deepening renewal over the past year?
I think what is important, again, let's quickly reflect on the background. Mm-hmm. In 2012, at the centenary of the ANC was proud that it has got over 1 million members. And what is important then is to question whether the numbers translate to quality. And you keep on saying that this is a big party that has got a lot of people. Indeed, it is true, but also at the same time, to which extent does the majority of the ANC members are serious about resolutions that are taken and implementation thereof? And I think we need to draw a clear line between the two. But also at the same time, most resolutions of the ANC are taken at the national conference of the ANC. And at that moment, there is a lot of, or a huge tension that relates to election of leadership. And what then would then happen is that most delegates who go to the national conference would actually be bogged down or focusing on leadership rather than focusing on resolutions and the policies of the ANC. And that is why, in most instances, when you talk about crisis of the ANC, most people talk about leadership and forget about decisions and resolutions that have been taken. And I think that is one area that is quite worrying for the ANC. But also at the same time, one needs to emphasize the fact that unity within the party requires an element of commitment and an element of wanting to move from one area to the other. And unfortunately, that is one area that is quite difficult for the current leadership and the ordinary members of the ANC to deal with. Maybe new strategies have to be developed to deal with the question of divisions within the party.
And we just have a few moments remaining. And so before I let you go, we do know that the party's National Executive Committee met yesterday in the build-up to today's celebration. What are the outcomes of that particular meeting, and what do you make of them?
Well, I think what is important is that the statement by the President today becomes the statement of the National Executive Committee. And what then has to happen is that the message of the National Executive Committee has to be delivered by the President. And what he has to touch on are serious issues, challenges affecting the ANC, but also in the main, also reflecting on the positive that might have happened in the party. And all that we need to hear, to wait, is to listen to the President making reflections on what has been happening within the party. But in any way, as a celebration, they'll always come up with positives and actually limit the negatives so that the celebration is actually not tainted by bad things.
All right. Thank you so much for your time, Levi Ndau, a senior political analyst, speaking to us about the ANC's 109th birthday celebrations taking place today. Thank you so much for your time and contribution, sir.
You're always welcome.
All right, we'll take a quick ad break now before we move on to our next story, which is concerning the 2020 matric results. Please do stay tuned.
Breaking stereotypes, moving boundaries, joining hands. Salam Media.